The man had been hiking through the forest when he came across a modest cabin that appeared deserted. Initially, he paused. Should he step inside? In the end, he chose to enter. What followed is enough to haunt anyone. This is what he recorded. It turned out the cabin might not have been abandoned after all. But who or what was inside? Was it the property owner or something entirely different? After this experience, the man said he would reconsider before walking into another so-called abandoned building in the woods. James Shear served as a U.S. Forest Service officer in Utah in April 2012. He was performing a standard patrol along a well-traveled scenic hiking trail deep within the forest. About midway through his route, he spotted a tripwire stretched between two trees at the entrance of a small deadwood shelter beside the trail. Tracing the wire, he discovered it connected to a suspended cluster of rocks and sharpened sticks designed to drop when the line was triggered. Upon closer examination, a second device was located at another entrance to the same shelter. This trap consisted of sharpened stakes embedded upright in the ground. A tightly drawn tripwire had been placed in front of it, positioned so that anyone who struck it would be forced forward onto the spikes. Authorities were notified about the hazardous and potentially lethal devices. Soon after, officers began interviewing hikers who had been in the area over the previous few days. Unexpectedly, the investigation led them to two teenagers. They admitted to constructing the traps but insisted they had intended them for animals. Investigators rejected that explanation. The design clearly targeted a person, and the traps were positioned far too close to a heavily used hiking trail. More specifically, they were set at the entrances of a small shelter that could easily attract a curious child or an unaware tourist. In 2017, Ivan, a 30-year-old man from Russia, suddenly disappeared while hiking alone in the Shatura district of Moscow. When he failed to return, his family reported him missing to authorities, prompting a search of the nearby woods. The effort produced no results and was eventually discontinued without any discoveries. 2 years later, in 2019, a hiker in the same region contacted police after finding human skeletal remains partially buried beneath leaves. The remains were later identified as Ivan. What made the discovery especially unsettling was the presence of multiple handcuffs, locks, and chains fastened to the bones and nearby trees. Ivan's tent was located close to the site, leading investigators to theorize that he had attempted an isolated Houdini-style escape, restraining himself and trying to break free without assistance, an effort that ultimately ended in tragedy. One of his friends later remarked that such a stunt was consistent with Ivan's behavior, as he often practiced survival techniques in extreme conditions. Others, however, suspect foul play, believing the scene may have been staged to resemble an accident. Ivan's official cause of death has never been determined. A teenage boy unintentionally captured footage of what appeared to be a witch's coven and later vanished without a trace. The original recording was made in August 2017 and, according to the video's description, was approved for release by the missing boy's family. The footage was shot in a remote rural location far from the city. The boy had traveled there to spend the summer holidays with his grandmother. While there, he discovered his late grandfather's old video camera and decided to begin a vlog documenting his time in the countryside. At one stage, he wandered deeper into the forest, climbed up a tree, and started speaking to the camera about his thoughts. Without warning, he lost his footing and fell. The fall rendered him unconscious. By the time he regained awareness, darkness had already fallen. What occurred afterward is deeply disturbing. He rises and notices a fire burning nearby. As he moves closer, he sees an unusual and unsettling woman holding a book, murmuring words while rhythmically swaying her head from side to side. Lying still on the ground before her is a human body. What is happening here? A ritual? The woman abruptly senses someone watching her. She jerks her head toward him and begins running in his direction. In May 2016, a man walking along a private forest trail in Harlan County, Kentucky noticed an object lying slightly off the path. Approaching it, he realized it was a trail camera. Trail cameras are waterproof outdoor devices typically activated by motion to capture wildlife, and many include night vision. They are relatively common in wooded areas, so the man initially thought little of it. However, this camera lacked both batteries and a memory card, appearing abandoned. He chose to take it with him. Later, he gave the device to a friend. When the friend inserted batteries, an explosion detonated inside the camera. It had been rigged with explosives set to trigger as soon as power was supplied. The blast was powerful enough to sever some of the man's fingers and injure his stomach. Authorities began an investigation and discovered another similarly rigged camera along the same trail. The devices were eventually traced to a man named Mark Sawaf, who was promptly identified as a suspect. Police obtained a search warrant for his residence, where they uncovered materials used to manufacture the explosives and a note stating, "Broken camera for a broken soul." Mark was taken into custody. Meanwhile, additional reports surfaced of exploding cameras in the area. In response, officers brought Mark back into the forest to indicate the locations of any remaining active devices. While there, he suddenly lunged for an officer's firearm in a final attempt to escape. The ensuing struggle ended with Mark being fatally shot. He never disclosed the whereabouts of the remaining cameras before his death, though authorities believe several more may still be hidden within a 5-mile radius of those Kentucky woods, waiting to be discovered by an unsuspecting person. This disturbing recording was captured by a police vehicle in the Saudi Arabian desert. At first, everything appears ordinary. The camera shows a vehicle traveling along an empty stretch of road, and then she appears. A stooped elderly woman dressed in white, with long black hair obscuring her entire face. She remains motionless at first, then slowly begins walking toward the car. The vehicle drives away, yet the figure continues advancing as though she is not human, but something else entirely. The longer the footage continues, the more unsettling it becomes. In July 1968, a group of women were seated at a picnic table near their lake house on Lake Michigan, playing cards and enjoying themselves when a powerful odor interrupted them. The smell intensified to the point that they struggled to breathe and ended the game early. Assuming a dead animal was nearby, they informed their cabin's caretaker, Shanty Bliss. Shanty ventured into the woods but instead traced the stench to another cabin he managed about half a mile away. Forcing himself through the overwhelming odor toward the front door, he quickly sensed something was amiss. He observed holes in the cabin's window glass. Looking through one of the windows, he saw the remains of a woman lying on the floor, and behind her, glimpses of others in similar condition. Horrified, Shanty fled and contacted police. Officers arrived and discovered 6 bodies inside. It was every member of the Robertson family. They had not been seen in weeks, but acquaintances believed they were out of town, as the family had mentioned plans to travel. Investigators determined they had been killed at least a month earlier. The inquiry yielded few leads. There was minimal evidence at the scene, and the family had no known enemies. The primary suspect was an employee of Mr. Robertson, but he was never tried in court. More than 50 years later, responsibility for the Robertson family murders remains unknown. Greg, the individual responsible for this video, states that after his grandfather died, he inherited a secluded cabin deep in the forest. He intended to stay there through the winter before putting it up for sale. However, shortly after settling in, he began hearing footsteps outside during the night. Odd incidents followed. A genuine photograph shows unusual wooden symbols someone had placed around the cabin, including directly on the doorknob. Greg continued discovering more of these symbols scattered throughout his property. One evening, while walking through the woods near the cabin, he spotted her, a pale, bald woman without eyes standing in the darkness. She was facing toward his cabin when he captured her on camera. Considering her frightening appearance and the strange happenings surrounding the property, many found it plausible to suspect she might be a witch. This was not fictional horror. It was actual footage. Even so, no one can definitively identify who or what she was. Numerous viewers insist the video is entirely authentic and not staged. Matt Bell and a co-worker were conducting excavation work in the woods of Danville, Arkansas, when they uncovered a 32-pound round metal object buried in the soil. Matt believed it to be a Civil War cannonball and decided to bring it home. Covered in dirt, it appeared old, so he used a pressure washer to clean it. After drying it on his kitchen counter, he photographed it. The following day, he visited a Civil War museum to confirm its authenticity. There, he learned it was not a cannonball but an active Civil War-era pressure-activated landmine. Matt was instructed to return home with the device and contact police. Authorities evacuated 20 nearby homes and summoned a bomb squad. The explosive was carefully transported to a landfill and safely detonated. Matt later recalled that his co-worker had tossed the mine to him from a ditch when they first discovered it. Considering that incident, multiple car rides, and the pressure washing, Matt was fortunate it had not exploded earlier. A frightening incident took place near Bristol in Lee Woods Forest. Two friends, Lola Swan and Kate Shannon, chose to camp there for several days. One of them had been struggling emotionally, and they believed the calm of nature might offer relief. It appeared they were not the first people to camp at that location. On the very first night, unusual events began unfolding. They distinctly heard footsteps, branches snapping, and leaves shifting. Something, or someone, was circling their tent. By morning, they realized several belongings were missing, including a hammer and a flashlight. The second night, the strange occurrences persisted. Eventually, one of the girls lost patience and called out, "Who's there?" There was no reply, so she whistled. A whistle came back in response. At that point, their fear intensified. Too afraid to step outside, they remained inside the tent together. Then, precisely at 1:00 a.m., they heard the sound of a child crying only a few meters from their campsite. It was deeply chilling. The following morning, they left hurriedly. After returning home, one of them reviewed the photographs taken during the trip and discovered something alarming. Between the trees stood a pale figure dressed in white, watching them. This footage was allegedly obtained from the Oklahoma State Police Archive, though little additional information is available.